All right, hi everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this virtual workshop. We wanted to make this accessible asynchronously as well so that people that were interested in participating and couldn't make it to the first workshop would have a chance to get to know this information and sort of have a chance to access the competition. We're here to talk about Project Pericles' Debating for Democracy Letter to an Elected Official Writing Competition, um, which is an opportunity for students to get involved in writing letters for political change, and hopefully, at the end of this, actually send their letter to an elected representative to start acting on that change. My name is Benjamin Shaw. I'm the student coordinator for the People's Pitzer and am happy to be co-moderating this event with Trisha Morgan. Um, our session goals for the day are to clearly understand the request for proposal criteria and the deadlines for this competition. We want to be able to make sure everybody knows where to find current legislation and leave the session with at least one legislative idea for a letter. Obviously, this will be asynchronously for all of you watching. We'll also provide time and a little bit of instruction on how to draft your opening and closing ask statements for these letters, hopefully develop an outline for including important letter elements, and finally, through also asynchronous means, we'll be able to provide feedback on some of these draft ideas for you.
Hi, everybody. I am Trisha Morgan. Thanks, Benjamin. We're just going to review a bit here about the requests for proposals. If you're not familiar, requests for proposals or an RFP, this is a very, very common practice for organizations that are soliciting award applications. We want to also make it clear that this is about letter writing to elected officials. So while this is a competition, it's also an important way of accessing and activating your agency with elected officials, and they do pay attention to written letters. So we're going to go over things today in terms of the criteria for the competition, because students have an opportunity to win some award money to further enact the work that they're doing, the civic engagement work that they're doing. So there's some pretty important key criteria. The first one is that the letter has to be written in a two-person team, and they have to be Pitzer students. The students also cannot be seniors. The reason for this is because if your letter is chosen as one of the winning letters, you will receive $500 to use the coming school year to advance your project that you wrote about in your course proposal. So unfortunately, it's not open to seniors. Seniors can participate, but they have to be a third person on a team. They can't be one of the two primary team members. Also, the letter is a two-page letter to an elected official. This is something that has to be addressed very specifically to either a senator or a representative. These are on state and federal issues only. The maximum words, it's like 1,200 words. They're not particularly very strict about the word count, but really keep it to two pages. You also have to include a project proposal with your letter. This is not part of the two-page minimum, so that it excludes any sources that you're going to cite, and it excludes your project proposal. The 2 pages is just for the letter. The project proposal basically needs to outline what you're going to be doing with the award money and the intended impact that you're hoping that your project will have. We're going to go a little bit further into the judging criteria of the letter in a moment when we talk more about the rubric. The other thing that you need to know about the RFP is that it lists a couple of different deadlines in the RFP. So March 12th is the deadline for all the letters to be submitted to the CEC. The program director, who is an administrator at the CEC, is going to then turn those in to Project Pericles for the competition. Pitzer can only nominate 4 letters maximum. So we will be meeting between March 12th and March 18th to select the finalists that we think are the top 4 letters. We will review the letters and provide some feedback on how the letters can be strengthened, and what we would recommend is, further edits for the letters. And then we will send those letters on your behalf. So you don't send letters to Project Pericles, you send letters to the CEC. And also make sure that you mail your actual letter to the senator or the representative that you're writing to.
So a lot of this has to deal with the legislative process, which is complicated if you're not already well versed in it, but that's what we're going to go over right now. So just at a macro level and sort of for a brief overview, the process of a proposal becoming a law starts with a representative sponsoring a bill, and that can either be something that the representative themselves comes into session with, or that's proposed by a constituent or a number of constituents. After the representative or representatives sponsor it, it will be assigned to a committee for its study. If the committee then chooses to continue it, the bill is put on a calendar for a vote. It can then be debated or amended by representatives in whatever chamber it's in at that time. If the bill passes the House, typically by a simple majority, it'll move to the Senate, and this is the same in both federal and state procedures. Once it's in the Senate, the bill is then assigned to a Senate committee, which is different than the House one, and then again debated, amended, and voted on. A simple majority is all it will take to pass the bill. Finally, a committee from members of both chambers will work out any of the differences between the two versions of the bill. It will then return to both the House and the Senate for its final approval. And then, last but not least, the government printing office will print the revised bill in what's called the enrolling process. And then at a federal level, the president has 10 days to either sign or veto that bill. If it's vetoed, it will return for an override. If it's signed, it will become law. So these letters have to deal with current legislation or with current issues that are up for debate in a more general sense. And so we wanted to give an idea of what it's like to find current legislation through this really helpful site, which is congress.gov. So this is the congress.gov website. This is going to be a great area to search for bills that are currently in session. You have a list of your most viewed bills in the top left. If you want to search for a specific bill that you already know the name of, like a House resolution or a Senate resolution, you can input that directly and read the text of it. If you also click on more options here, you have the advanced search options, which will let you search based on the committee, based on what chamber it's in, based on what session of Congress it was submitted during. If you know who your local representatives are or who you want to write your letter to, you can go to this area down here and see who sponsored things. And all of this will make it a little bit easier, in addition to this words and phrases area letting you search for key issues, for you to find bills that are already dealing with your topic before you write your letter. This will also help to influence the way that you go about your letter writing process in knowing what's already on the floor of Congress. Another really good option if congress.gov isn't giving you enough information is GovTracks, and we'll provide all of these links when we send out this recording.
Okay, so for those of you who are unfamiliar, we just want to make sure that you're aware of how to really use a rubric and how to maximize its use for you. So really think about a rubric as a recipe for success. It's a document usually that's going to correspond directly to a request for a proposal. And it's going to outline the criteria that are in the proposal. The one that we have is weighted according to the RFP for this letter writing competition. We're going to go over that in a minute, but pay attention to the weighting of each section because there are different sections where we're going to outline what you need to do and what elements you really need to highlight and hit in your letter, but they're not all weighted the same. So think about that in terms of the effort and the time that you're putting into each section. Also, pay really close attention to each area in your letter. Think of it almost as a checklist. If you have missed parts of the rubric, parts of the RFP that are included on the rubric, that's going to be reflected in the letter, the analysis of your letter from the reviewers. And use the rubric really to write it, to review it, and to edit your letter. So don't think of it as a one-time, like I'll look at this document one time and then that's it. really use it to set up what you're going to do, use it as you're doing the actual letter writing, and then use it again to do your final editing and polishing, just to make sure that you've really hit each note. We're going to go ahead and review the actual rubric right now. So this is what the rubric looks like. It has really succinct information at the top there that tells you, a quick kind of reminder of all of those really basic things that need to be covered and included, including the very basic criteria of like how to form a team and how many pages and all of those things. Also, make sure that the goal of the project is going to be to try to advance your issue in some way. You are really making that clear and highlighting it throughout your proposal, and making sure that all of your research is cited. Any outside research that isn't common knowledge, cite it. Use a footnote or use an endnote, and make sure it has to do anytime you cite statistics, anytime that you cite research in a particular area that supports your claim. This is really, really important to do. So if we can can we make it a little bit bigger, Benjamin? Just a little tiny larger. There we go. So the first set of criteria is about the policy analysis and research portion. This is 55% of the evaluation. This is without a doubt the weightiest portion of the competition. So you want to make sure that your letter is presenting a public policy issue in a convincing manner. You want to make sure that the letter is focusing on a federal or state public policy issue. And you want to be able to draw a connection to you, the letter writer, and why it's important to you. Are you a constituent of this area? Maybe you attend college in this area, and so you're part of that community and in some ways as a college student. Think about those different ways that it personally impacts you. Maybe it impacts you and it's related to family experiences that you've had, or other community-based experiences that you've had. Those are really valid and really important to include here. Making sure that you're demonstrating like what that impact is. You also want to make sure that you're being thoughtful and logical. You need to make sure that you're considering your sources and who and what you're kind of bolstering, what types of arguments, who is this going to impact? And also make sure that it really understands the historical context of what you're writing about. So if you're writing about the economic stimulus, for example, or something that is related to COVID relief, you need to make sure that you highlight your understanding of what has already been done and what's been happening or what's not been happening that should have been happening. So making sure that you understand the context in which this issue is occurring, not just on a broad scale, but also within the specific community of the representative or the senator that you're writing to. The next aspect of the letter's grading criteria is clarity of presentation. This is the next largest section of the evaluation. It's 30%. You need to make sure that you are clear in what you're saying, right? So you have to open up with an ask. It has to say like, dear representative, dear senator, or whatever. And it has to say, I'm asking you to vote yes or no on XYZ. You're also going to repeat that at the closing, but that's how you create a really strong, clear ask, is you sandwich it at the beginning and the end. You also need to make sure that you're communicating the significance of the problem and the solution. So you can't just talk about how the effects and the impacts have been of the problem. You need to also demonstrate or provide some possible solutions and think about the feasibility of those solutions. So, are these things possible? Is this realistic? Where would the money come from if there's likely going to be money related to this policy or legislative issue that you're advancing? And then the last piece is the project proposal. This is just 15% of the evaluation. A strong letter is going to get the evaluators to look at your project proposal. A weak letter with a fantastic project proposal is probably not going to cut it. So keep that in mind. think about things that are creative and also effective. And then again, a feasibility, not just in terms of financial cost. Can it be done on $500, but can it be done in the time period that you're proposing? Things like that. I also just wanted to say that another really strong connection that I've seen in winning letters in the past is when you actually incorporate community partners and community members that you're working with on your letter writing issue. If you're writing about issues of incarceration and you're currently in an inside out class and you're potentially able to work with a fellow student that's inside on writing a letter, that would be fantastic. So consider that. Consider, allowing your community partners to have their own space for some voice within your letter. So even though you're collaborating on a letter, maybe not having it written all in your voice, allow your partners to write some of it. These are really, really strong. If you want additional tips or support, or you have questions about how to best approach a collaborative letter writing process with your community partners, you're welcome to contact Benjamin or myself or anybody at the CEC at the Community Engagement Center. We would be really happy to help you with that. So again, just to highlight and just reiterate some of the really, really important aspects and elements of a winning letter. And again, this isn't just about winning the competition. The RFP and the rubric and the whole project has been designed so that the letter writing process creates an effective letter by following these steps. So just to reiterate, just make sure that you have a strong, clear opening and closing ask. Make sure that they're worded the same. If you're saying, we want you to oppose XYZ, make sure that you say it the same way in the closing so that there's no confusion. Make sure that you draw a personal connection of some kind. It's about what's making this compelling that you're writing about. Why does this matter? Why should this elected official care and think more about this? Knowing your historic context, again, feasibility, very important. Is it realistic in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of the folks that you're proposing would support or implement this policy? Are they going to be likely people that will be willing and able to do that? Is it a thoughtful argument that you're making? Are you using credible sources and making evidence-based claims? Also making sure that you attend to a cost-benefit analysis of the opposing argument and the proposed solution. So you can talk about the problem as you see it, you can talk about the solutions as you see it, but a really strong letter will also talk about what opponents to your view, what their main argument would be and why their main argument doesn't sufficiently negate what you're proposing. And then you also, again, want to just make sure that you have a strong and creative project proposal. And again, if you have any questions or need, support on any of those aspects, you're welcome to reach out to any of us at any time, and we'll be providing our contact information at the end of this presentation.
All right, and so just to go over the direct draft outline, again, this is just a reiteration of what Tricia just mentioned, but going from what your legislation is, going from those sources that we showed earlier to find legislation and addressing who you're writing to, make sure that you have what your opening ask is, and this will also go again at the end, that personal connection, your historical context, and the cost-benefit analysis. And all of this will help to make sure that you have all of those elements that are necessary for a winning letter. And now Pitzer has actually had winning letters in the past, and we want to take this chance to show one of those and go over how these draft outline requirements fit when you actually go to write your letter and proposal.
Yeah, so Pitzer won the competition last year. We had a winning team. This team was composed of Uma Freya Demetria and also Jessica Sass. They wrote their letter to Senator Tony G. Atkins, and they were writing in particular about Assembly Constitutional Amendment 6. So this is a particular bill that would reestablish the fundamental right to vote for Californians on parole, with a 2021 ballot initiative to amend California's constitution and update relevant state elections code. So you can see here, they immediately are putting their ask. right at the very beginning. I mean, you don't need to do a preamble, really. It's like jump straight to it. Make sure that you mention the legislation by name, and that you also discuss what it's going to do. Then they move into the historic context. They talk about like what the law is currently, how it affects people, what that effect has further on other people, not just the people who have been incarcerated, but it has effect on everybody in California. And in particular, it's related to, very deep disenfranchisement laws and legacy that's gone back for a long time. So they talk a little bit more about the efforts to restore voting rights and what those efforts have looked like. You can go ahead and go to the next page. And then they start talking about, what this means, why it's important, why is this compelling, right? So they talk about the history, they talk about the ask, and then they start talking about this is how it's affecting people now, right? They then go on to talk about what their opponents are saying, what people, that oppose this bill are saying about it, and why that, again, is not a sufficient argument to negate what their proposal is. Keep going to the next page. They also discuss how reentry works and what parole is designed to do. They talk about recidivism and how people are also disenfranchised from their civic rights and abilities to participate in their own community governments as a result of this inequitable law. So they close by, again, reinstating their ask, why it's important. And then they move on to, they sign it. Remember, this is a letter. It's not an academic paper, so it needs to be addressed like a letter. It needs to be signed like a letter. The only thing that makes it a little different from a typical letter is that it has endnotes or footnotes. You can go on to the next pages. Then it talks about their project proposal. They give a brief overview. They talk about the goal of what they want to cover, why they're doing it, who their target audience is. And then they talk about the different activities that they wanted to do. So again, this letter was written and submitted back in the fall or earlier before the pandemic happened. So their project proposal needed to be amended. The project proposal that's listed in this letter, I believe, is the original. And so they needed to make some amendments. That's totally possible. But this is the work that they're working on forwarding right now and what they're hoping to do with that work. Then they talk more about their budget breakdown, exactly what they're hoping to do. Some students will use their project proposal money to travel potentially to other colleges to see how they're addressing these problems on their campuses or in their local communities. They might travel to speak with elected officials, either in DC or in Sacramento, depending on who they wrote their letter to. Some folks get responses back on their letters. They might also want to use it for events or to bring speakers or consultants or other folks that can help them, advance the work that they're doing. So this is one of the reasons why this project proposal in particular was really strong, because it had all of these particular elements that we discussed. They hit really every note, and that's something that's going to make it more likely that you're going to be able to secure some of those resources to come back and then try to advance your issue in a meaningful way. So I think that's it for me. And there's also, let me also say real quickly, there are additional letters that we'll be sending out or making available along with this recording, all of the links that we shared so that people can access all of those resources. We also have a folder with the other 5 winning letters. So the competition is made up of colleges from 30 different institutions from across the United States, and they all submit up to 4 letters for their institution. And 5 winning letters are selected from all of the national participants. So Yeah, we will have decisions will generally be coming out, I believe, later in April if your letter was selected. But again, make sure that you mail your actual letter to your representative by March 12th and also submit it to the CEC if you wish to participate in the competition.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for being with us during this presentation. We hope that it gave you some good information on how to go about this process, and we're really excited to see the kinds of proposals that you all come up with. If you have any questions as you're writing these, feel free to reach out to either Trisha or I. Our emails are listed, we're the top two on this list. We also recommend that you take this time right now to put together some ideas that you may have for what you want your letter to be, and maybe try and start outlining or at least find the person that you'd be writing to using those resources that we mentioned earlier in the presentation and also that we're going to be sending out with this. We really look forward to having you as part of this process, and when you are ready to submit, feel free to send your letters to Jackie Contreras. Her email is there at the very bottom, and we'll review those and hopefully be able to submit them. So thank you all so much. Let us know if you have any questions, and we wish you good luck as you start writing these letters.